Good afternoon, and thank you all for keeping it KTN. This is KTN Africa Speaks. My name is Joy Doreen Biira. On this 6th of July 2013, we're basically going to get you up to date with what's happening around the continent and also let you know what you're saying about these very issues on social media platforms. And also we'll be looking at Click and what pictures you've been capturing on social media in regard to what's making news around the continent. Later on, we are going to be getting into the platform where we're going to expound more on issues that are trending across the continent. And this week we're asking, do you think Africa should decriminalize homosexuality? But before we even go there, I'm telling you, we've got a number of guests in the studio with us. We're here to share with us whether or not we think Africa should decriminalize homosexuality. We have David Kuria, we have Leonard Mutisya, and we also have Martin Ssempa as well as Craig. So you can be sure that we're going to have quite a discussion. Let's start by taking a look at Web City.
We start up north, where Egypt's military on Wednesday ousted Mohamed Morsi, the nation's first freely elected president, suspending the constitution, installing an interim government, and insisting it was responding to the millions of Egyptians who had opposed the Islamist agenda of President Mohamed Morsi and his allies in the Muslim Brotherhood. Egypt's Chief Justice Adli Mansour also was sworn in as the country's interim president on Thursday, a day after the military ousted Mohamed Morsi following a week of massive protests. So just what's next for Egypt? At Abdul Saad 2011 tweets, Egyptian army will now be a game-changer tool in the hands of big powers to overthrow unfriendly civilian government. At Alakwe says Egypt 1 step forward and 5 steps backward in the democratic journey. Morsi won fair and square. 1 year is not enough to turn things around. And Larry Pinel from Lagos, Nigeria, quotes some of the protesters. We want a king. We don't care, but all we want is a king to rule over us. Egyptians remind me of Israelites. And Nayem Kabir adds, Egypt's military are the real tyrants and people are fools. You don't oust a democratically elected president with the army. At Shadi, Amid from Qatar says to avoid another coup, new president should decree all future elections free and fair under the condition an Islamist party doesn't win. And we take you down south. Nelson Mandela remains in critical but stable condition. South African government reiterated that Mandela is not in a vegetative state, contrary to recent court documents. A close friend of Mandela's, Dennis Goldberg, said the legal papers that said Mandela was in a vegetative state might have been written when Mandela was in a coma or unconscious, and that perhaps Mandela then improved. This came on the backdrop of a court case filed by 15 Mandela family members against a Mandela grandson who had moved the remains of 3 Mandela children from their original burial site. A court ordered the bodies to be moved back to Mandela's hometown of Kunu. The family feud drew a rebuke late Thursday from retired Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who appealed to the family of Mandela, also known by his clan name Madiba, to overcome their differences. Piers Morgan, famous for his straightforward tweets, says undignified squabbling between Mandela family members must not cloud or harm the great man's legacy. He deserves more than that, a lot more. And this was retweeted 759 times. At Lomse from Nigeria tweets, this Mandela issue is what horror stories are made of. Does anyone else see it? And Issues in the News adds, the squabble within the Mandela family is very sad to see. Africans divided against Africans. This is why the continent is lagging behind.
And that's it on Click. Well, this is some of the pictures we captured for you in regard to the Egyptian protests. Now, it's time for us to take a look at Click. And you would actually find these pictures quite interesting because of the one sole reason that they were taken by individuals as well as media houses. Just take a look at this week's Click.
On Click this week, hundreds of thousands gathered in Cairo's Tahrir Square in Egypt calling for the ouster of Mohamed Morsi. For weeks, Egyptians demonstrated, and when Morsi was finally ousted, the anti-Morsi section celebrated his ousting with fireworks. These are some of the pictures shared on social media platforms from Egypt.
You're watching KTN Africa Speaks, and now would like to give you some details in regard to today's topic. On the platform today, we are asking, do you think Africa should decriminalize homosexuality? And, well, come with me to this super wall over here. If you take a look at the world, the entire world, if you look at the countries across the world that are legalizing same-sex marriage, we have Argentina, we have Belgium, Brazil, Canada, we have Denmark, France, Iceland, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, we have Spain, we have Sweden, we have Mexico, we have the United States, and we have South Africa over here. Now, if you notice, of all these countries, it's only one African country that has legalized same-sex marriage on the African continent. And as we talk about homosexuality, this is quite a sensitive issue across the continent, not just in Kenya. And we've seen a number of remarks that have been made. And just recently, President Barrack Obama was on a 3-nation Africa tour. He did travel to Senegal, he traveled to South Africa, and also to Tanzania. But these are some of the issues he did talk about. He did mention something about the rights of LGBT in Africa. And he says, you know, the issue of gays and lesbians and how they are treated has come up and has been controversial in many parts of Africa. Now, if this has been controversial in many parts of Africa, the African leader for whom he made these remarks, that was in Senegal, Macky Sall, did respond to what President Barack Obama said. And this is what he said. He said, Senegal, as far as it is concerned, is a very tolerant country which does not discriminate in terms of, in terms of inalienable rights of the human being. But then he went on to say, much as we are tolerant, we are not ready to decriminalize homosexuality, not just yet, in as much as there is a big tolerance. And well, if you look at countries here that are having very strong anti-gay laws. We have Liberia, which is actually one of those countries where a bill banning the same-sex marriage was, unanimously passed in the Senate, but has yet to be taken up by the House of Representatives. And the bill has yet to be voted on. It's still going on. And one of the reasons why African countries have not yet taken a stand on passing these bills into law is for the one sole reason that aid could be cut from Western countries. Western countries, we're talking about the UK and the US particularly. And also we have Malawi. The government said that it would suspend implementation of the current law imposing maximum prison terms of 14 years against men engaged in same-sex sexual conduct. That is for Malawi. But we also have other countries. We have Nigeria. The House of Representatives passed a bill imposing 14-year prison terms for gay marriage. And we also have countries like Uganda and so many other countries. But now, without wasting much time, let me introduce the guests that we have in studio with us this afternoon. And one of the guests with us in studio is Leonard Mutisya. Well, I think I'll just let you introduce yourself. How exactly do we describe you?
My name is Mutisya Leonard, and I coordinate sexual minority health programs at LVCT.
Great. And we also have David Kuria in studio with us. David, how would you describe yourself?
I would say I was a former political aspirant for the Senate seat in Kiambu.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. And well, now at this point in time, would like to also point out the fact that this is a very critical issue. Critical as it might seem, the number of issues that have come up on whether or not Africa should decriminalize homosexuality. Also, have we lost the battle? Has Africa lost the battle? I'm not saying we, but I'm saying has Africa lost the battle to the gay community? Those are some of the sensitive issues that are coming up. But then also, let's also not leave out the fact that we are having the health of these people at risk. The more we criminalize homosexuality, the health of these people is at risk. And I would like to see some of the remarks that came in from Uganda. And joining us just now is Pastor Martin Ssempa, who is joining us live, and he's going to be telling us exactly what he thinks of President Barrack Obama's remarks that were made in Senegal. And well, let's just see if we can have him online here so he can be able to give us those remarks of his. At some point in an earlier phone conversation, I did talk to him, and he mentioned quite some very strong remarks where he said President Barack Obama should have been arrested in Africa, because you don't come to Africa and say things like that, because Africa has got values, has got norms, and therefore it becomes quite very hard for you to actually come to a continent like this and say things like that. But let's hear from Pastor Martin Ssempa himself. Sarah.
I don't know if the whole president of the most powerful country in the world cannot tell the difference between man and woman and how man marries woman. That really is worrying. First of all, because this is kindergarten stuff. Man marries woman. That's so basic. It's primary school. Secondly, for him to call on Africans in, for example, Senegal. This is 97% a Muslim country. This is a country that is very conservative. For him to come in and use these long words, equality, I mean, he's calling us, first of all, it's a confusion. The president is confused. Somebody's got to tell the most powerful president, Barack Obama, you're confused and you're trying to confuse us. Don't spread your confusion here in Africa. In Africa, man marries woman. That's it. For 5,000 years, our fathers, our ancestors have never told us that a man could ever marry another man. That's so crazy. So the message we want to get out to Barack Obama is that this is not a dream of our father, as his book. This is a nightmare of our father. 2, this is not the hope or the change we can believe in. Or no, this is hopelessness. It's a nightmare.
Well, I'll start with Leonard. You've heard Pastor Martin Ssempa from Uganda. He actually says he is an anti-BSV, that is, the Sodom vice. He's actually against the barbaric sodomy vice, and that is how he describes himself. I don't know what you would say to him, Leonard, in regard to the remarks he just made.
I think statements like that are very unfortunate, because if we look at our country, I don't want to comment about legalizing homosexuality or decriminalizing homosexuality in Africa. Let's talk about Kenya. If you look at our country, in the last month, there's been attack on a gay sex worker who was slashed on the neck and died. And there's been another attack of another gay sex worker who was slashed on the neck and is still recovering in hospital. Here in Nairobi, there's been an individual who was raped with a hammer and hit on the head with the same hammer. And we also know of a recent story where we have lesbians who are expelled from high school in the Rift Valley. And when we have an environment which does not regard human dignity, regardless of our religious positions, regardless of our moral positions, it's very unfortunate, because we need to ask ourselves, what is the cost of life in Kenya?
Right. Well, David, let me hear from you. What would you say to the remarks just made by the pastor?
I think the pastor basically mixes two issues that we consistently hear about. There is the issue of criminalization, and there is the issue of same-sex marriage. The two are completely different. I think what people in this country and across Africa, because I've traveled, are asking for issues related to public health and to human rights. So when it comes to human rights, Leonard has just talked about the whole issue of violence, the whole issue of stigma and discrimination, lack of access to services, etc. When it comes to public health, it's about accessing health. Now, in terms of the law, let's note that pretty much what President Obama said. We've already done it in Kenya, because we've enacted a constitution that guarantees, Article 43, right to health, Article 27, which is anti-discrimination. So all that we need to do is to remove a colonial legacy, something that, that we basically inherited from the West.
Well, remove a colonial
legacy.
Really, yeah.
Well, now we're joined here by Doda Craig. By the way, Doda Craig is a Ugandan journalist, and for the very first time, he's actually revealing here on KTN Africa Speaks that he is gay. For reasons, Uganda has got you would call them barbaric laws that don't really accommodate the gay community. But he would like to share his experience with us in regard to how he's being treated or how the gay community is treated in Uganda. Doda, what do you have to say about this discussion?
Well, Joy, to start off with, there is actually no African law on homosexuality, because what is considered right or wrong in Africa when it comes to homosexuality is based on traditional and cultural values that most people have, because the communities actually raise people to believe and think and know that homosexuality is a wrong thing. Now, the impact that it has had on the gay community in Africa is that it has promoted self-hate amongst the gay people, because now they are raised to believe that what it is that they are is wrong. And it has also promoted a lot of fake marriages, because most of these people actually end up marrying women and have children and live a lie in society, but also end up having side relationships with their male companions. And this could possibly also be a danger to both the gay people and the straight people, in a sense that psychologically it also tortures someone and they're never in the right state of mind, and this is basically very unhuman.
Well, thanks a lot. That's Doda Craig from Uganda, but he's now working in South Sudan. And from what he says, he actually does point out the fact that it's not really that time, but they will get there, or the gay community will get there. I know he's in a very tight spot, especially being gay in a country like Uganda. It's almost as barbaric as he can describe it. But, I would like to know, first of all, let me ask, is any one of us, are you gay?
Yes.
You are gay. Okay, and how is it? How is the experience knowing that you are gay and knowing that, there is a health risk with us right here at the moment, not only in Kenya, not only in Uganda, but across the African continent? You just said that you are gay. How hard is it for someone who is gay to have health, to access health facilities?
Now,
how does it affect Africans?
Yeah. If you go back to the examples I cited around violence, when you grow up in an environment where you're bullied, traumatized, terrorized, are scared that you'll either get arrested or you get beaten up or you get killed, it's very hard for you to be open and honest about your lifestyle. And the people who actually have a secret, private gay lifestyle are more likely to engage in anonymous sexual encounters that often don't use condoms. They're less likely to come out and access HIV testing services. They're less likely to even get information on the appropriate prevention commodities, because these are people who will not come out and seek appropriate, relevant services. And
so
when
how
our
do
healthcare,
we deal with this?
So how do we deal with it? We create an environment first within the healthcare system, which is a process that's going on. And I think the work that the Ministry of Health is doing is really exciting, trying to make sure that public health staff are sensitized and are better providers. Create an environment where when you go to access health services, your sexuality is not a barrier. It's not a cause for stigma or alarm, because all Kenyans have a right to health, and that health includes sexual and reproductive health, and it's regardless of sex, regardless of gender expression. These are values enshrined in our constitution, and the appeal from the community of lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender individuals is just to respect human dignity and to make sure that our religious positions, our moral positions don't instigate violence.
Right.
Don't instigate hate.
Well, don't instigate violence and don't instigate hate. Let me get to you, David. From a political background, as a former political aspirant, I'd like to hear your political stand on this. How best do you think these people should be treated, knowing that we are dealing with an African community who think that, this kind of, how can I call it, behavior, if I might generalize the African context, they actually think that this should not even happen on the African continent. And aside from South Africa, we still have all the other African countries still rejecting the gay community. From a political stand, what do you think is the way forward?
I think two things. The first is that, of course, the issue is socially stigmatized, but it's not the only issue that is socially stigmatized, right? So working around issues of social stigma and putting in place structures that enable one individual or community to enjoy the full benefits of the constitution that we have enacted. What Leonard talks about, right to health, access right to health to the highest attainable degree, that kind of thing is something that we have to do without discriminating any individual. The second issue has to relate to us as self-determination of ourselves as a people. What we have is a Victorian law. If you've ever had the opportunity to see in UK the Houses of Parliament, you will notice that the Parliament, how the Queen accesses the Houses of Parliament, is constructed to the taste of Queen Victoria, because Queen Victoria was a very religious person. Now, we need to ask ourselves, are we going to continue to expose ourselves because criminalization is a social determinant. It diminishes your ability to access health. Do you want, as a people, to continue? If you look at HIV crisis in this country, we're losing 59,000 people annually. We have almost 1,000 new infections every year. MSM, the gay community contribute 15.2%. Question is this situation inevitable? No, it's not, because we know other countries that have done better. So
well, that's the million-dollar question. Is this situation inevitable? And before we can even wind up, let me just get to some of the posts here on Facebook. We're having a lady called Jennifer Oloma Igwe, who is saying, we are a very cultural country. She's actually from Nigeria, and she's saying, we are a very cultural country, so being gay or a lesbian is considered a taboo. In the days of our forefathers, they would be castrated or their families banished. And even today's, it's still a big anomaly. We now have a law that bans same-sex marriage, and those who marry could face up to 14 years in prison. Witnesses or anyone who helps homosexual couples marry could also be sentenced to 10 years in jail. This is just from the Nigerian perspective. And we have Pa Kofi Tinagay, who is from Ghana, who is saying, Africans are a deeply spiritual people. Our culture is intertwined with every action and activity, and we do not comfortably exist outside our way of life. Allowing anything that falls outside our accepted standards of morality and normalcy is a different or a direct infringement on the very fabric of sanity and existence. And of course, there's so many other tweets that are flowing through Twitter, and I'll just read one of them where Mishori Thuku is saying, according to me, it's unethical and godly, inhuman, and lacking the right words. Let's hear from those doing it. And I'll just, as we wind up, I'll ask one final question. Were you born gay? Were you born and you just realized you were different, and you're just different sexually?
Just allow me just to go back to those comments, because it's hurtful. It's hurtful because we know that, speaking for Kenya, and again, I want to be careful not to generalize Africa. We know that we're a secular state, and although religious influence is a big factor of social indications on social temperament, we're still a secular state. And it is important to remember that in a secular state that is like this and that is democratic, the people have human rights, and that should be the spirit and the philosophy that guides how we treat each other.
Interesting.
And
let's get to the second question.
Then the second question, I think that's a very it's not a useful question because there are people who are same-sex practicing out of abuse and it's a coping mechanism. There are people who say that they were born gay, and there are people who are dependent on
So
me.
were you born this way?
When you ask
On a
that
yes or no
question,
basis?
when you ask that question, it's as if to create a hierarchy. That's some people who are more gay than other gays, and we're asking all the wrong questions. We're
Right.
bringing up issues of how were you born, why do you want to get married, issues that are not even coming from the people who are being targeted with
Right.
this.
Well, we're out of time at this point in time, but I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us in this edition of KTN Africa Speaks. We will continue this discussion on social media. And, well, to everyone out there who is throwing in all these tweets, well, let's just say this was a matter of discussion. And we will continue this same discussion next week on KTN Africa Speaks. So do keep those tweets and Facebook posts flowing in at KTN Africa Speaks and Africa Speaks on Facebook. Well, my name is Joy Doreen Biira, and the conversation continues on social media. Up next is Sports Final.